Hi, welcome back to Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts. My name is Steve Shermett, and I've been taking you on a virtual tour of Jerusalem. Usually we look at the Bible and archaeology, and that's what we're doing, but I've also been showing you some snippets of modern Jewish and Arab culture as well. On a previous episode, I was walking you through the new city of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, by the eastern wall of the old city, by the eastern gate. I showed you the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, and I told you we were heading over to King David's palace. So we're now at the foot of King David's palace, and I'm going to show you another view of the Mount of Olives in the Kidron Valley. And this is a special view because it was after a lot of rain, and there's a lot of green grass. Usually, you know, Israel's very desert-like, and it's usually just brown. So this view is especially unique. So take a look at your screen. Let me show you what I got going here. As I pan to the right here, we're looking at the Arab village of Silwan. It sounds like the word Siloam, as in the pool of Siloam. It's the same word. Off to the right there is the Valley of Hinnom. So what you saw was a view of the Mount of Olives, the far right side of it, or the southern side of it, panning over to the south through the Kidron Valley into Silwan. The place I'm standing right now, when I took that footage for you, is the bottom of the glacis, I'll explain in a moment, that King David's city and palace sat upon. When you've seen old war movies, you've probably seen a castle. Some of them might have had a slanted wall leading up to the castle. That's the glacis. It's not only a support structure for what's built on top of it, but it's extremely hard to attack because you can't really walk up it. It's at too steep of an angle. So what you end up having is, say, a 20 or 30-foot glacis, and then on top of that, a wall, and then on top of that, a palace and a city. It makes attacking very difficult. Not too long ago, the glacis of the city of David was discovered, and I'm going to show you what remains of it. Let's take a look. That's the top, and we're looking now down towards the bottom. The whole thing has not been excavated. This is just a piece to show you what it would have looked like. And though I've never read or learned it anywhere, I'm almost certain this had to have been plastered over so there wouldn't have been any handholds and footholds. It would have been smooth going up. That's what I believe. So up on top of the screen there, you probably saw a covered over area. We'll get there in a minute. I'm going to show you the glacis again, but just from a different angle so you can get a better feel of what it looks like. As if you were there with me, a close-up. Let's take a look. I wanted you to get an idea of some of the height of this. And on top of that would have been the palace and all the rest of the city of David. And this is all that's been excavated. Whether they'll excavate more or not, I don't know. What remains, what hasn't been destroyed, I don't know. That's a little taste of what it looks like. Now, on top, where they think David's palace was, I'm going to show you in just a moment. But when I showed you that video clip of Silwan, you notice it was from the bottom of the valley up to the top of the hill. The opposing hill, where we're going to be just now, would have looked down at some of those houses. So you can imagine if David's palace was there. There's a story where it says King David sent his people off to war, and he stayed behind on the palace. And he was, I guess, up on his roof, and he looked out, and he saw a beautiful woman taking a bath, bathing. And her name, coincidentally, has to be Bathsheba. And he fell for her, and he ended up committing adultery with her. Horrible story. It's recorded in the scripture for everybody to see. The thing about this, though, is now you can understand how he could have been on his roof and looked out and seen somebody bathing in their yard or on their roof, because his palace was over all these other houses. All right, let's take a look at where the top of that glass is. Take a look at your screen. Just to give you an idea of what's been unearthed so far. There's Silwan in the background there. We're at the top of the glacis, and they've excavated, and this is what they have found. Nothing fancy or special to see. There you can see the floor of what might have been his palace. Who knows? Maybe it was somebody else who built years later that's been dug up here. All of this stuff, a lot of it is subjective. It's educated guesses because so many years have passed. But you're looking at an active archaeological site that's also a tourist site. Some of the archaeological sites tourists don't have access to. Some of them they do and they're no longer digging. Some of them they do and they're still digging, still excavating. And I believe that is one of these, that tourists have access to parts of it and they are still excavating. Now, I told you it's difficult to know what these things are because they're so old. When David built his palace, we're talking roughly 1000 BC. You know how much has happened in that area since then? Empires have come, empires have fallen. And when you have a strategic location, say where David's palace was, the next person in charge might take it over, it'd become their palace. Unless taking it over meant its destruction, then they build a new palace. And this goes on for years and years. And then when the archaeologists get there, they look at the Bible and they look at whatever historical records might be available, and they say, this is the general area where David would have had his palace. I wonder where it might be. So they dig, and they find a pot. And they dig some more, and they find a foundation. And then they find a glacis, and they were like, wow, this is a glacis. That means it was fortified. Where else would it be but David's palace? And that's how they come up with that sort of thing. But speaking of thousands of years, there's this concept in the secular world that man has developed over time from a cave dweller and a cave painter up to modern man. He was stupid and evolved to smart. That's not true at all. Ever since we have human history, humans have been extremely smart. In fact, I tend to believe that early man, and to me that's not caveman, that's Adam and Eve and his descendants, that early man was actually more intelligent than modern man. I think our DNA has corrupted over the years. I think we've gotten less intelligent. Now, that doesn't mean we're not still intelligent. We are. And we have amazing scientific discoveries in medicine and in physics and in engineering. We have built on the knowledge of those who have gone before us. But ancient man did things that we still don't know how they did them, like the building of the pyramids and so on and so forth. So I'm talking to you about ancient man, not just because David lived 3,000 years ago, but because I visited the Cave of the Treasure display at one of the museums. The Cave of the Treasures was an archaeological site. It was a discovery, really. It was just a cave with a bunch of old stuff in it that the secular archaeologists dated back to like 10,000 years ago or something. I mean, to what the Bible would have said the beginning of humanity. And I want you to see how wonderful, how impressive their artwork is and their metallurgy skills are. So I'm going to bring up a video to show you some of the finds from the Cave of the Treasures from what probably dates from the dawn of human history. Let's take a look. I'm not sure what those little beads or bells are for, but I wanted you to see them just so you can see how finely crafted they are. We could not do better today. And yet, like I said, these date to what the seculars say, probably about 10,000 BC. Biblically speaking, I don't even think the planet's that old. So the dawn of human history, if they've dated it right, this impressive metalwork was done. Early on in the book of Genesis, they mention how that there are those who worked in metal. So we know from the biblical record that this stuff was done. I don't know about you, but it amazes me and thrills me all at the same time. Not only to see the Bible being proven true once again, but just to see what ancient man was capable of doing. And to kind of undo the brainwashing we got in our secular education. We weren't knuckle-dragging cave people. We had amazing art, engineering, metallurgy, music. We were able to do all sorts of amazing things ever since the dawn of time because we were created intelligent and in God's image. We did not evolve from some sort of monkey. We are people that God made, and this is evidence to that end. One of the things I did on my last trip to Jerusalem is I visited a museum I had never seen before, which was the Rockefeller Museum. If you like biblical history or world history, you should insist on visiting the Rockefeller Museum. It is world-class and amazing. Some remarkable things there, and some of these things you get to touch. There are some things in there that are referenced in the Bible, cities and such, and leaders like Ramses and so on and so forth. Well, the Rockefeller Museum, I got some pics and some videos of, but I also spent some time in the Jerusalem Museum. And I asked them, can I videotape in here? And I showed them my phone, and the guard said yes. So you're going to get to see some of the things I videotaped in the Jerusalem Museum. So we go from the Rockefeller Museum and the Cave of the Treasures. They also had some of that stuff in the Jerusalem Museum. And we're going to start talking about things I saw in the Jerusalem Museum in just a couple of moments. But I got to build up and give you some history, because what I'm going to show you in the Jerusalem Museum ties to the Bible. So I'm going to give you some biblical and secular history, and then show you how these things are verified and expanded by what archaeologists have found. When I say verified and expanded, verified because the people and events mentioned in the Bible are also seen in the rocks by the shovels and in the manuscripts. They dig stuff up, like steles and pillars, where these guys are mentioned in there. And the Bible might give us some of the details of what happened in that war or that political treaty. But the stele that they dig up, or the pillar or the cylinder, also mentions that event from their perspective. So we get the biblical perspective, and then we get the other side's perspective. Sometimes it fills in the gaps, sometimes it flatly contradicts. Now, a secular archaeologist, they'll look at both of those as being equal, what the Bible says and what the rocks and the shovels and the manuscripts say. But I don't think so. The Bible is the Word of God. If some foreign historian wrote a story that differs from the biblical account, I'm going with the biblical account. But if it gives details that aren't mentioned in the biblical account, there's no reason not to consider that those details may very well be true, in fact, are likely to be true, because even secular historians who write about religious and political events are going to get a lot of it right, maybe not all of it right. In previous seasons, we've talked about the flood of Noah and some of the things that historians got right, some of the things they didn't get right. But they all got right that there was a massive flood. So in a similar way, we get to read about these events. Okay, so when I get back after the break, we're going to talk pull. Not bull, pull. Not B-U-L-L, P-U-L. I'll tell you about this guy when we get back.
GLC invites you to visit us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. Here you can stay in touch with all of the latest GLC news, along with daily scriptural inspirations, current specials in our bookstore, links to our newest shows, and online media, plus articles from trusted sources. Feel free to drop us a message or a question by posting to our page. Please help us out and like our page by clicking on the thumbs up button. Don't delay, drop by the GLC Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. We want to interact with you today.
Welcome back to Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts. My name is Steve Shermett, and we're taking a tour through biblical Israel. We're looking at what archaeologists have dug out and how it ties to the biblical story. And on the previous side of the break, I said when we come back, we're going to talk pull. Not bull, B-U-L-L, P-U-L. We got a picture of this guy. This is a relief carved into stone of a leader named Pull. He's called something else too. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But first, let me tell you where he fits in historically. I've got a chart here. Let's take a look. On the top of that chart, you'll notice yellow, and on the bottom, you'll notice green. And it's two sections, just so it's not uber long. You'll also notice on the far right, the green goes farther than the yellow. These are the two kingdoms of Israel and Judah. This is their timelines, and what you see in those timelines on this chart are the names of the kings. They're the ones in yellow, and you see the names of the yellow on top are the kings from Israel. The green on the bottom are the kings of Judah. And then the blue ones in between, those are prophets that ministered during their reigns. And then on top in the red, you see some other words. These are the words that give us the historical tie-in to the other kingdoms. So on the top, for example, during the times of Jeroboam, right after that it says Baasha and Elijah, that's kings of Assyria. And then it gives us their names, Ashurbanipal II, Shalmaneser III, and it all lines up with biblical history. We're going to zoom in to the far right there, right towards the end of the yellow line. You see at the very end it says Hoshea. He's the last king of Israel before the Assyrian captivity. That Assyrian captivity happened at roughly 711 BC. So we're not too far from the end. According to this timeline, we're somewhere in the 740s and 750s BC. The king of Israel is Menachem. And let me bring that chart back up for you. And I want to point out to you, right underneath, you notice it says Hosea, and 2 bars, one on the left, one on the right. That's Hosea's timeline, to show us that he ministered during the days of Jeroboam II, during the reign of Zechariah, you see that on the top, during the reign of Menachem, the big one that's boxed in red, during the days of Shallum, again on top, during the days of King Pekahiah, again on top, during the days of Pekah on the bottom, and during the days of Hoshea on the right. You'll also notice that Amos underneath ministered contemporary with some of Hosea, and you'll notice so did Micah, and so did Isaiah. Now let me keep your eyes on this screen. As we go up over them to the foreign powers, you'll notice we've got Tiglath-Pileser III up on the very top there, and we've got Rezin on the bottom. These guys are mentioned in the Bible. All right, let's step away from that chart for a moment. And I want to read to you and talk to you about some biblical history. I told you we're going to talk pull. This happened during the time of Hosea, Amos, Isaiah, the prophets Isaiah, and then the kings Uzziah and Jotham, as I showed you on the chart. 20 years or so before Assyria totally destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. Pul came in and he attacked Israel. He took some of Israel captive, but he's not the one that totally wiped them out. He did come in, he conquered, he won, he took some people captive, but Israel still remained a nation. Here's how 2 Kings puts it. And I'm reading from 2 Kings chapter 15, verses 17 through 20. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menachem, son of Gadi, became king over Israel. And he reigned 10 years in Samaria. Samaria was the capital of Israel. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land. And Menachem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his control. And Menachem exacted the money from Israel, from all the very wealthy, from each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back and did not stay there in the land. All right. Why would another nation invade another nation? Obviously, they want something. They either hate you and want to destroy you, or more likely, you have wealth, resources, and people that they want. And so what happened in the ancient world is if an invading army was coming, you would send ambassadors. And you'd say, what do you want? And they would say, we want all your wealth. And they would say, well, I'll tell you what, let's avoid war. Instead of us giving you all our wealth, we'll give you $10 million. And the emissaries would go talk to their commander, their king, and the commander would come back and say, okay, we won't invade you for $10 million. Or he might come back and say, no, we want $100 million. And then the ambassadors would go back to their king and say, he turned down 10 million, he said he wanted 100 million. We can't do 100 million. We can't even come close to 100 million. We might have to fight. How many guys have they got in their army? We counted 50,000. 50,000. We can win 50,000. Okay, let's go to war. Or they might come back and say, they had 500,000. 500,000? We only have 50,000. We can't win a war and we can't pay $100 million. What do we do? Let's go offer the Egyptians $30 million to give us their army to fight this battle. And let's hire a bunch of mercenaries. This is how it went in those days. So long story short, Pul came in, Menachem bought him off. We even have the details of how he raised the money to buy him off. It says Menachem exacted the money from Israel, from all the very wealthy, from each man 50 shekels of silver to give to the king of Assyria. Well, the Assyrians came in and attacked Israel. Israel bought them off. They also attacked Judah. Remember, the Jewish people had two nations at that time, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. So as they went south to attack Judah, Judah could not buy them off. They failed. Let's take a look at what happened from another perspective, 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 19 to 21. For the Lord brought Judah low because of Ahaz, king of Israel. For he had encouraged moral decline in Judah and had been continually unfaithful to the Lord. Also Tiglath-Pileser is Pul, okay? Same guy, goes by different names. Also, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came to him and distressed him and did not assist him. For Ahaz took part of the treasuries from the house of the Lord, from the house of the king, and from the leaders, and he gave it to the king of Assyria, but he did not help him. So he tried to buy him off. He took the money, but he wouldn't relieve him. That's messed up. So not only do they say, hey, we're going to attack you, you can buy them off, but you risk giving them the money and they still attack you. It's not good to go to war. Dealing with other nations, especially wicked nations, is not good. But as God pointed out in the scriptures, the nation of Israel was also wicked at this time, and that's why God allowed this to happen, to punish them, to teach them a lesson, and to straighten them out, scared straight, disciplined straight. Well, he carried part of Israel away, as I mentioned, 1 Chronicles 5:26. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, that is Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He carried the Reubenites, the Gadites, the half-tribes of Manasseh into captivity. I don't remember offhand. I think this was a second coming of his, that he came, he was bought off, came back, or he might have done it before he was paid off. I don't remember all the details. This is what the Bible says about Pul, Tiglath-Pileser, and his relationship to Judah and Israel. Now, there's more. A stele has been found. That's a memorial stone with writing on it to commemorate an event or to mark a boundary. Usually after a big victory, one is set up to talk about the victory. They found Pul, Tiglath-Pileser's victory stele that mentioned his invasion of Israel and Judah. How cool is that? Let me show you the video of it I took when I was there in the Israel Museum. You notice it was broken, so they put it all together again and filled in the parts they didn't have. But it's cool. They've got his head. Look at that. That's Pul's head. And then you can't see the close-up here. I'll show you that another time. But there's writing on there, and the writing talks about this event. Let me show you another picture. It's a close-up of Pul, the Tiglath-Pileser stele, and I'll show you a close-up, and then I also have the side view of the stele of Tiglath-Pileser. So now you have an idea of what the writing looks like, what the material is made up of, the height and size of the thing. This stands about the height of a man. It was up on a little platform in the museum, but I think if it was off that platform, it would have been about my height. So Pul, standing there on his stele, would have appeared in human size. The payment that King Menachem made to Pul is mentioned on that stele. Let me read to you from an article about this. And I'm just going to quote the article, read it verbatim. The outstanding event of Menachem's reign, notes the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, was the supremacy of the Assyrian power in the West. This is confirmed in detail from Assyrian sources when Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria took the throne. In his annals, Tiglath-Pileser records the receiving of tribute from various nations of the West. Menachem of Samaria is mentioned by name. Rezin of Damascus, I pointed you his name out on the chart. He's also mentioned in the Bible. Hiram of Tyre, etc., etc. A fragmentary text adds further details about Menachem. It says, and I quote, "He was overwhelmed like a snowstorm and fled like a bird alone, and bowed to the feet of his conqueror, who returned him to his place and imposed tribute on him." So here he's bragging. Pul is saying, I conquered them, he bowed at my feet like a coward, but I restored him as king, and he paid me tribute. Then it goes on, the article. But after the death of Menachem and the murder of his son Pekahiah, Assyria's relationship with Israel changed. The new king, Pekah, rebelled against the Assyrians, refusing to pay tribute. But by 734 BC, Tiglath-Pileser and his army returned, annexing parts of Syria, and the article says Palestine. I hate that word. It wasn't called Palestine. Parts of Syria and Israel, especially in the Galilee and the Transjordan area. In 2 Kings 15, 29 through 30, it's written, "In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ion, Chatzor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria." So you see how the account of Pul and the account from the Bible mesh together. It's the same event, and each one gives its detail about how it went down. And then it says the house of Omri, which is the house of Israel, overthrew their king, Pekah, and installed Hoshea. It's just data after data, all because of the rocks, the shovels, and the manuscripts. I'm so glad you joined me. Join me next time. I'll see you then. I'm Steve Shermett. Bye-bye, and God bless.
Order your copy of this program from the GLC bookstore by calling the numbers or visiting the website on your screen. Please include the program number when ordering.